Hi, everyone, from wherever you are listening to Deep Dive with Dr. D from. One, I appreciate if you do take a listen to the information I give. I know I'm currently on the journey of telling my life story, and my hope is that in telling my life story, it can help someone. It can help someone to know that they're not alone. It can help someone to know that there is hope. It can help someone to know that they can turn their life around. I will be continuing today to talk about what is really one of my really dark periods of my adulthood. And I have to say, doing this is both helpful for me and it's always a little hard. It's a little hard because I've done things in my life that I'm not proud of, that I'm ashamed of, that uh, I feel guilt, right? And some might say, oh, you've changed your life and you've healed and you're helping other people, so you shouldn't feel that way. Well, here's what I'm going to start this one with. I think that it's good that I still have some guilt about the things that I've done, being a burglar, committing crimes, hurting people, breaking trust, being a terrible, terrible person in a relationship along the way. Those things. With a time period when I wasn't there for my son. I think this is my belief that the fact that I still struggle a little bit and hold some remorse about that is good in that it keeps me from doing it again. It helps keep me in check to say, yeah, you've come a long way, David. You've had massive growth. But hey, here's a reminder of why you don't ever want to do that again because it feels shitty, right? Um, if I'm being real honest, isn't that interesting when people say that? What are you lying every other time? If I'm being real honest, I also worry a bit telling my story. This is a new form on this podcast that I just started, so it's another avenue for people to hear my story. I worry some about what other people think about me. I don't think I'm alone in that. Like they're like, oh wow, you've done some terrible things. What kind of human are you? And it doesn't like weigh on me so much, obviously, because I still tell my story. But those are my struggles. So let's get into it. If you haven't listened, um, go back to the previous podcast I released. It's titled "I Meet Meth," and if that's interesting, you can go to the one before that. It's "I Meet Crack Cocaine." This is a period of my life where I had been previous to those two drugs coming into my life. I had been fairly functional, and I say that like that because outward looking in, you would go, oh yeah, he's got a job and he's able to kind of maintain a relationship and he's got family and so outward looking in prior to crack cocaine and meth, I was able to kind of keep it all together. And I say kind of keep it all together because I had internal battles going on a lot. I was drinking and I smoked pot. I smoked pot and I drank for since I was 12. And drank at heavy levels along the way, blackout levels, and would stop drinking and just smoke pot and then smoke so much pot that, for me, the motivation wasn't there and I'd be lazy. But alas, oh, I said alas. One of my followers says, you say that word a lot. So, okay, well, I guess I do. Alas, when crack, cocaine, and meth come into my life, that's when really that somewhat semblance of keeping it all together really just gets ripped away. So you can listen to those episodes and kind of get caught up if you want to. I'm going to read a couple passages from my journal from that period of my life I have my very first journal that I started writing in, and it spans those really dark periods. There's actually a period of 8 months where there's no entries. And for a period of time, I journaled what I would say pretty regularly, at least, a few times a month or something. It wasn't every day. I know people who do that. I've done that along the way. But I have a period of 8 months of my life where there's nothing. And it, I was running. It was during my time using meth. And I remember pockets of time from that period of time of my life. And with methamphetamines, when you use this drug, I had pretty quickly went from snorting methamphetamines, which gives you actually the longer lasting high from that drug. You would stay up for days. Like that would just literally days, you know. But I had shifted from doing that to smoking it. And, you just pour it on foil and light it and, inhale the smoke. And that high was more fast acting, more intense, but not as long lasting as if you just ingested it through snorting it. Or, oh yeah, gosh, I remember you would, if you didn't want to snort it because it was really bad for your nose, right? It burned, and that was actually like, oh, this is really good. It's burning my nose. I know it sounds crazy, but that's like, oh, this is going to be the best high ever. So your nose would get tore up. Your nose would start bleeding after doing that for so long for some people. So you would, if you didn't want to smoke it because you knew that wouldn't last as long, you just put it in some tissue and swallow it. That would be an easier way. Also, not good on your stomach. These are literally chemicals. The meth of the 90s were just toxic chemicals that you're putting in your body. So when I would go on these runs of staying up for days on end, there was a period of time where, and I wasn't alone, where you would, in order to finance your own high, you would sell it, right? You could sell some, make enough to keep your own habit going, and maybe make enough money to then buy more and sell more. I was not a real good dealer because I was doing most of my own product, using most of my own product. And this is a fun fact. I knew dealers both with crack cocaine and methamphetamines and even marijuana, not so much with marijuana, but they wouldn't do the drug themselves. A really good dealer is not doing the drug themselves because they know. In fact, the guy that I used to go to his apartment on Center Street in Tacoma to get crack cocaine, he was a super cool dude, and he did not do the drug. He didn't, because he knew, right, what was going to happen if he did the drug. Methamphetamines, I don't remember meeting, any real good dealers that didn't do this. Was a powerful drug, and it's interesting, the world of users with crack cocaine and the world of users with methamphetamines were pretty different. With methamphetamines, the paranoia and the your thinking is just like off. You're just like thinking people are following you, thinking people are watching you. Now, so imagine the people you're using with, you didn't really trust them either. There was a lot of just unrealistic thinking, just psychotic thinking, like just crazy, like, oh boy. I remember I had my car. I think it was an 85 Mustang. And I used to just drive all over the county delivering drugs because, I was a dealer. I wasn't that good of a dealer. I do remember getting roofied once. I had went to deliver some drugs to this house in Parkland, and kind of the next thing I remember is kind of coming to, and I leave, and all of a sudden, all my drugs were gone, and they didn't know what happened. I didn't realize this until much later, that I was thinking back to this time period in my life. I hung out with a group out in the Parkland Spanaway area. I just remembered I met this girl through a guy. You just have all these drug world connections. And I started seeing her, and stayed at her house. She still lived with her mom. Oh boy. Her mom had her own set of issues. I think some mental health issues. And so her daughter, who was having all sorts of people come in and out of this house, we would just stay in her room. It was not a good situation. I remember this guy I used to hang out with. He was in the meth world again. We're going to be big time, and we're going to be big drug dealers. And we hung out for a while. In the previous episode, I used to do what's called mailbox shopping. This is mid 90s. This is before the internet era. You paid all your bills through the mail, or you physically went to a place. You didn't pay for anything online. So mailbox shopping, I don't think it happens as much now. What you see happen now is people steal your packages off your porch, right? Porch pirates. I'm sure a lot of druggies do that. But mailbox shopping, what you would do is you would just go in the middle of the night and just go check people's mail, and you would look for credit cards or credit card offers. And I had the nickname The Jackal. Not one I'm proud of, but it is what it was during this time period in my life. And so I would go and do mailbox shopping and just grab mail. Oh God. And get credit cards and activate them. That was the goal. That's what I was looking for. But I also kind of figured, and I don't remember exactly how I did it, but I would call and apply, or pre-approved credit card offers, and act like the person and say, yeah, I want your card, and then they'd send it in the mail. So I would keep checking that mailbox until that credit card came, and then I would call back and activate it. That was one of the crazy behaviors I did. I say that I was a burglar. I wasn't real good. I would look basically for me, I was not good at picking locks, or being real sneaky per se, but I would look for open garages, unlocked garages, and in the summertime, open windows in houses. Other than that, I wasn't like you see in the movies, like this really good burglar, and I was terrible. I wasn't good at it at all. I remember going in this one house in Tacoma and sneaking in through an open window. And the last thing I ever wanted to see was people. I was deathly afraid. Like, I remember, again, I'm high or in a psychosis, or oh God, super paranoid. And my biggest fear would be getting caught, getting shot, And I go in this, it was kind of a house that was turned into an apartment. I crawl through the window, and I'm just, sneaking around, and it's dark. And so and what did I steal? I don't know, anything of value that I could fit in my hands. I never really had a plan. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to, plan my criminal behavior. It was usually on a whim, or I needed money. So, and I go in this house, and I'm looking around, and I look down this hallway, and there's a door open to a bedroom, and I see a couple sleeping. Whew, that was the first. I turned around and tiptoed and got the hell out of there. I do remember getting chased a couple times when I would do things with people, making noise. And I'm just fortunate I'm not dead or in prison, maybe still, I don't know. This has been 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago. So that was the stuff if you followed my story, you remember Lynn Gilmore, the guy that I met. He pulled over on the side. It pulled me over when I was walking on the side of the street when I was just a teenager, and he asked me if I wanted work, and well, that's not what he wanted. He wanted to sexually abuse me, and that's what started happening. Well, that relationship, he would be in my life in some way from then when I was 13, 14 until I was 29 when I find a life in recovery. And I ended up just using him as a source of income, a source of money. And I remember when I started doing meth, I would go to his house, and he lived in at the time, what was a pretty nice neighborhood in the Parkland area. And man, I was just filled with rage and anger. And so I was sneaky. I thought, oh, I'm going to get him. And so I would call him and say, hey, you want to hang out? You got any work for me? And he always was like, he was always wanting to show me previous to this time. And I think he was trying to educate me on financial health, but he was wealthy, and he had this stack of credit cards in this credit card wallet, like 30 credit cards. And, he was just like so cool. Well, when I started doing math, I went, I'm going to show him. So I stole a couple of his credit cards from him, and I started using them. I would use them at gas stations, or I would call places and make orders and pick them up. Again, pre-internet era. So if you wanted to use a credit card, you had to physically go somewhere and use it. And this was a period of time when they would ask you for ID. So and you know what, to be honest with you, yeah, I think you could use them at gas stations. I think we were there maybe. But so I stole a couple of his cards. I'm like, this is easy pickings. And I would call, somehow I figured out a way to use them was to call in orders to stores and give them the credit card number. And then you would go in to pick up the order, and you would have to show them the card. And I would just say, I'm Lynn Gilmore, right? Wasn't. Anyway, and I did this at Nordstrom's at the Tacoma Mall, and had gotten away with it. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. I would actually order stuff that my dealer wanted, and then I would trade it for drugs. So I had done this. I had called, and I went in to pick up the order, and I think I'm being slick, you guys. It was just like, are you really? I was gaunt. If you've seen my before and after, it's actually the profile picture on my podcast of my life during this crazy period. I was gaunt. I was like 110 pounds, soaking wet, maybe. And I looked high. I didn't think I did, though. I thought I was just so slick. So I go into this Nordstrom. I was actually with that childhood friend of mine that I think I brought up in my podcast, Julio. Him and I were doing drugs together and kind of running and gunning together a little bit. I'm like, hey, come with me. Let's go pick this stuff up. And so I, strut into Nordstrom's thinking I'm cool. And I go up to the counter, and they're like, oh, yeah, just wait 1 second. Yeah, no. So here comes store security. Boom, they arrest me right on the spot, bring me back in the office, and I'm just, oh God, I'm screwed. But I clam up, and I, don't say anything. And I'm trying to remember, I think I did go to jail. Yeah, okay, so here's what happens. So Julio, he really wasn't, he was just there. And I'll never forget the loss prevention person, because I had done that work before, and I would end up doing it again. It's part of the positive side of my story in recovery, is I would be able to go into this field again. But at the time, I'm the criminal. And the loss prevention person was trying to get me to admit. And I'm just like, I ain't saying nothing, call the cops, blah, blah, blah. So I think they did. And I think I went to jail. I don't remember for sure. But here's the interesting thing. I think I was also during this period, I know I must have been, I would go to his house, the man who sexually abused me, who now I had stolen his credit cards. I would go to his house in the wee hours, middle of the night, and I would be like, answer the door, tell your neighbors what you did, because he had the image in his community that he was just like this pillar of the community, the pillar of his church. So when I had met Meth, I had decided, I was going to out him. And I remember he would come to the door and be like, David, come in here. He didn't want me doing that. Now, he never pressed charges. Not that I'm saying that because I'm proud of it, but interesting that he never pressed charges. So that was some of the behavior. I did a lot of my running around out in the Pierce County, Spanaway, Parkland area, some in the Tacoma area. Got lots of tickets because I was high and speeding usually, and I had lost my license. So my driving record, I actually still have my old driving record, became pretty lengthy with driving while license suspended, speeding, and no insurance, because if you don't have a license, you couldn't get insurance, and I didn't get it anyway. But this is also the period of my life when I end up becoming something I never thought in my wildest dreams would happen. I became a convicted felon. I had gotten the drive. When you get a driving while license suspended, that's actually a criminal charge, but it's not a felony, it's a misdemeanor. So that had been happening. But the felony, that changes your world in a lot of ways. And it's during this period of my life that I end up with 2 felony convictions due to my behavior, rightly so. And I was fortunate. I didn't get caught for a lot of what I was doing. My family life during this period was non-existent. My family were those drug users that I was hanging out with. I remember one Thanksgiving, it must have been in fact, the Thanksgiving of 95, that I went to my aunt and uncle's for Thanksgiving. And I remember just feeling so uncomfortable and just not, obviously not wanting to be there, but feeling like I wasn't a part of that family. But I remember that going there. But I didn't have a relationship with my family at all. When I had went to treatment the first time for crack cocaine, I actually, if you've been following along, I went and tried staying at my mom's, but her boyfriend at the time, he was still drinking and smoking pot, and that didn't work. Anyway, during the meth period of my life, which was about a year and a half, family was non-existent. I barely saw my son, which brings me to my ex-wife now, Cindy, who she had 2 new relationships during this pocket of time, about a 3-year window. The first one was with a guy named Rob, and she was with him when I went to treatment the first time for crack, and then we come to find out he'd been smoking crack the whole time, which was ironic enough. And I'm not dissing or being mean-spirited towards Cindy, but she was, there was a, like, you can't do that, but it's like her freaking own boyfriend was doing it. And my son was calling him Papa, I think. I never liked that. I didn't want my son calling anyone else dad. I wanted to be his dad, but yet I was doing drugs, so. And then she got together with, I just lost his name, with another guy. And she had moved out to an apartment in Steilacoom. And him and I ended up doing meth together. Keeping in mind, if you remember, my history, Cindy was raised in an alcoholic family, with her dad being an alcoholic and her mom being classic codependent. So that was kind of her picker. So when she dumped me, rightly so, she picked Rob, which initially he was a good guy, but then he had his own issues with drugs. And then, God, I can't think of that guy's name. She got together with the other guy, and she was with him for a while. And he ended up doing meth, and him and I would do meth together. So Cindy went through a lot with the men in her life, myself included. And my so family, it was not good financially. Obviously, it was non-existent. When you're in that deep drug world, you're not paying your bills. I didn't have a place to live. Yeah, home life. I would kind of crash at my stepdad's, just off of Sixth and Cushman, but it got to the point where I couldn't stay there anymore because I was only using him, and he kind of caught on to that. I would only use that couch in that living room, and I would sleep for days, right? With methamphetamines, you have this crash after you're high and you're up for days on end, or a week or 2 weeks. I think for one period, I was up for 2 weeks straight. Imagine just what your body does in response to that. So then you would just crash. And so I would just use Jerry's place to crash. And then I would wake up. And when you would start coming to, you'd eat everything in the house. And I was not contributing. I was just sucking off of him for a place to live. So I remember him and me going toe to toe. And then I just didn't go back there. So it was from then until I started really the trajectory. And I have it in my journal. I think it was after my, oh yes, now I remember. So I had started during this period of meth, like this isn't working. I was committing crimes. I was scared of getting caught. And so I started dating the girl. I can't think of her name, that she lived out in Spanaway. I had reached out to her and said, hey, I talked her into dating again. And initially she didn't know about all the meth. She was kind of curious of what the change was, but I was truly kind of wanting to change. Okay. And I started working with her brother-in-law, sorry, and doing construction. Yeah. And I have it journaled in here. In fact, let me go to this. I had it journaled in, yeah, there it is. Once. That loud sound I've been doesn't end up on the recording. So this is November 8th of 95. So and I want you to hear this in the way that you can receive it, because people are like, you just need to quit. And for a lot of people, it's a process. Like, I was wanting to quit. I was wanting to change my life. And so this was during that period. I was staying out at her place. She was letting me stay there, and I'd gotten a job with her brother-in-law. And there is a church in Olympia, Washington, that is still standing, that I helped build. It's off of, I think, Black Lake Boulevard. Today is day 14 of my attempt to quit smoking. The attempt is going well. I'm finding it hard at this time to cope with the situation I'm involved in. The problem is Robert. Now, mind you, my mental state during this period of my time, I'm literally kind of withdrawing in a lot of ways from meth, and I was trying to not drink. So I was probably not a fun person to be around myself, alas. Oh, I said the word alas. I say it a lot. I said it again. Is Robert. It seems to me he has a problem with everything in his life, and he's been in every situation there is to be in. And he is not at fault for anything, and he's got the answer for all. Now, I try my hardest to worry about nobody's problems but my own, and I've made a decision to not judge others, but I hear his stories every single day at work, and I'm all too often wondering how true his stories are. The other problem is he puts down his own wife and the woman I love. And I've made a decision to make it clear to him to not put down my girlfriend in front of me again. I try my hardest to appreciate what he's done for me, but on one occasion he said he does things for people so when he needs something, they'll feel obligated to help him. I don't want to continue, and that was the end. So I remember this time period in my life. I was truly trying to make change. I was making change. And I was struggling, when I read that now, I was struggling in a lot of ways with some of his same views, but I was wanting to make change. So this is the, when are we here? The winter, November of 95. And it would take a few months because I would end up back in treatment in March of 96, which would be the real catalyst for positive forward movement. Now, this is where family does come in. And I asked my brother about this, and he said it was okay that I talk about it. My brother, Bob, he's who I was raised with. I have, I think, four other half brothers that I've never really known. But Bob, he'll always be my hero in my eyes. He's 6 years older than me. I know he did his best to try to protect us as kids from the chaos of our life. I'm sure he did. I know he did in a lot of ways the best he could, but he was a kid himself. But and he's someone I've always looked up to. I do to this day. He's this guy in every sport he's been good at. He's like probably one of the best golfers I've ever seen golf. Like that's his real sport. It's been his real sport for decades. And I know, has always wanted what I think all of us kids have always wanted. With seeing our mom behave in the way she did, what we wanted was kind of the opposite of that. We wanted to meet someone and have a good, healthy family life. And I know my brother struggled with that. His first marriage ended with its own chaos. I won't tell his story of that. He did get out of that first marriage his four amazing girls. Excuse me. And then his second marriage was, I remember Kristen, I think was her name, was a period of my brother's life. This is the yuppie era of the 90s. And if you are in my age group, you remember yuppies. And my brother was kind of a yuppie. He lived in Seattle. He lived in West Seattle. And my brother always drove cool cars. And he always had this image of, and he was in some ways, I'm sure, doing well in life. He always dressed well. He always drove nice cars. I remember his condo in West Seattle. In fact, he let me stay there, him and Kristen, during the crack period of my life. And here's where it gets interesting. And it was like, it's kind of skewed my view of, doing the right thing. Is he's always been a hustler. He's always done what he's had to do to get by, jobs, right? And he, on the side, was delivering newspapers. I think the Seattle Times. And again, this is in the 90s, so newspaper routes were big. And he had a motor route, a car route. And this is when I was kind of trying to quit doing crack, I think. But I used to smoke crack with my brother, and he always said, you can't tell anyone. You can never tell anyone. Because he was able to, I kind of envied him. He was able to do it and still keep his life together. So him and I would, on some occasions, I'd go up to West Seattle and I'd go on his paper route with him, and we would smoke crack cocaine. And this shows you the difference between, I guess, and crack's a powerful drug. I don't want to be dismissive of that, but the difference between crack and meth. So when I ended up in my meth days, I remember he wanted to try it. Of course, I couldn't tell anybody, and I never did until really now. This is the first public time. And again, I asked him, he's like, yeah, you can say what you want, right? So, but I remember he tried meth and he did not like it. He didn't want anything to do with meth. He's like, oh no. Yeah, so when I think about family, and that really for me, because my brother was always, during his yuppie years, and always, he was my mom's favorite, and he was viewed as the goody two shoes, and he could do no wrong. And I guess I didn't have to, but I did. I kept that secret from our whole family. Really, if you're listening to this, until now publicly. And I asked him 6 months ago when I said I'm going to write a book, if I could talk about it, and he said I could. Yeah, and he would later This is going to come later. So this is still in that period of my life, the dark years, 95, 94, 95. But it would be 98, 99 when my brother would go through his own dark period of his life. And I had never seen my brother show vulnerability, being really real. But when his second marriage ended, for my brother, that was, I think he would agree, that was his really dark period because he would come and live with me um, in Puyallup for a period. And I love my brother. My brother and I, it's an interesting thing. I know I'm kind of out of that dark period, what I said I was going to talk about, but my siblings and I don't think we're unique for families that have grown up in trauma and chaos. It's like we're close. Like I love my brother. I love my sisters. But we don't talk much. We don't. And we'll talk when we talk. It's not like, why haven't you called me? And it's like we're beyond that. It's so dumb. I love seeing all of them when I can, but none of us really we're all kind of living our lives. My sister Sherry lives in Tacoma. My sister Tina lives in Ohio. My brother, he lives in the Tacoma area in Lake. I think he's got an apartment in Lakewood. But we don't talk a lot. And sometimes, like when I'm sitting here talking about it, I'm like, gosh, man, that's weird. It is what it is. We're all in is Bob in his 60s now? I'm going to be 58. Yeah, he is. Oh my gosh, my sister Sherry's going to turn 60 this year. So we're, late 50s and early 60s. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think about that. But during those dark periods, I would do drugs on occasion. It wasn't all the time with Bob, but I had to keep it a secret. Couldn't tell anyone. And I never did. I never did. That was never the case with either of my sisters. In fact, during this dark period, the 94, 95 period of my life, it'd be 93 to 95, my sister Sherry, she would start working in law enforcement. In fact, she would end up being a corrections officer at Pierce County Jail for the Pierce County Sheriff. And then she would end up being a Pierce County deputy and then a Lakewood City officer. So I'm kind of glad I got into recovery because I would have sucked for my sister to have to arrest me because that's where I was doing all my craziness. Tina, at this point, I think she was gone. I think she had moved. We lovingly say my sister escaped to Ohio. She had moved to Ohio by this point. So let me read some journal entries, and I think I'll close this one up. And then on the next episode, I think I'll start talking about some really good changes in my life because I know it's hard for me to talk about, and it's like I try to be a positive person, so hearing all this darkness is not good. Oh yeah, so here we go. I'm going to read a couple. And to paint the picture, my brother was in Amway for a while when he was, this was in the 90s and he was living in West Seattle. Him and Kristen had gotten into the Amway way of living. Oof, boy. And anyone who's ever been involved in Amway, it's a whole different world. My brother's always been a good salesman, like really good, like really convincing. And so he had also gotten my sister Sherry and her husband at the time, Vern, involved. And the one cool thing is about that life is there was a lot of positivity. And so this is January of 96, and I was really needing to make change. Everything in my past, that recent past, was really catching up to me. Doing meth was no longer fun. I didn't want it. I really saw that I had to get out. And so my sister had let me stay at her house because she saw that I was making some change. And so I was sleeping on her couch. She had 6 young kids, and she had bailed me out of jail. I think I told that story my last episode, that I had gotten picked up on a warrant for burglary. And I just was like, oh, I'm done. I'm screwed. And I'm sitting in jail, and I get bailed out. And my sister and her husband put their house up and bailed me out of jail. That it was December of 95 that I got picked up on a warrant for burglary. And I was just like, oh boy, oof, I need to change my life. And so I'd been staying at her house, trying to make positive change, was for the most part doing good, having some slip ups, but really just like, okay, come on, make the change. And I was trying to get back into treatment, but I had to wait. So I used to go, my brother would invite me because he was wanting to help in the best way he knew how. And so they would go to these Amway events where there would be these positive speakers, like really motivational. And it actually helped me. I was like, oh, okay, I can believe in myself. I can do it. Now, I wasn't necessarily wanting to do Amway. I was just wanting to not do drugs. And so I have this journal entry from January 14th of 96. It says, we went and saw Joe Folio last night. He's a very inspirational man. I must be honest and say I'm getting closer. So making this business a reality. I guess I was wanting to do Amway. I have to say I was angry again when we go to a function like this and I'm put with Sherry. Oh, yes, that's right. We're not together, and I don't want anyone to think we're together. So me and my brother-in-law's sister, Sherry, had a little fling. Yeah, she was staying at my sister and brother-in-law's house, but I didn't want to be in a relationship with her. I still wonder, here we go. I still wonder if anything will come of my secret. I pray to God not. I'm not happy with my attorney. I've called him several times and he still hasn't called back. One day at a time, one step at a time, and keep myself in check at all times. Love, David. Now, I said I was going to close this up, and I am with the secret. So as these things go, I had been trying to stay sober, stay away from drugs, stay away from all of it. I was wanting to get back into treatment, and right after the first of the year, I had actually made a New Year's resolution, January 1 of 1996. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I had been to treatment once before, kind of knew what I needed to do. I was probably going to some meetings. I was waiting to get back into treatment, and I decided my best decision making at the time was I was going to go out with some friends to this bar in Fife, and I was just going to drink a little, you guys. Boy. Well, what did I end up doing? I drank a lot. I got hammered. I stole a car. I did another burglary. And I just remember coming to at my sister's. I don't know if my sister ever knows that this happened. Thank God it's 30 years later. Alas. And so then I was like, oh, I'm screwed. And so that was that secret. Would I get caught for yet another crime that I committed while under the influence? Now, here's the thing that happens is I finally get back into treatment, and this will be the next episode, is I get back into treatment. I get a recovery date, and I keep it. February 21st of 1996 is a very important date for me. It always will be. And I start moving forward in my life. I start really peeling the onion of my life and start healing and start moving forward and really grab a hold of recovery. That will be the next episode. Love to all.